This is a presentation on how to persuade others with specific reference to types of power and how they may be used to effectively achieve compliance with your requests or commitment and so forth. So persuasion here is talked about specifically in regard to types of power. At the completion of this module, you will be able to identify 5 common types of power, identify 3 outcomes of attempts to use power, identify which of the 3 outcomes is most likely to accompany each of the 5 types of power attempts, identify guidelines for optimal use of each of the 5 types of power. So we're going to see how knowing something about these types of power can likely lead to certain kinds of outcomes. We'll go through that. Also identify things that influence your power and how to enhance it. This exercise will focus on different tactics for using power in your influence of others. You will examine whether you are comfortable exercising different types of power in this endeavor. You will review what research has found in regard to the outcomes of 4 approaches to the use of power, how to use each one, and how to acquire more power. So let's look at these 4 types of power that serve as the primary focus of this presentation. Number 1, position power. This is the use of the power given to you by the position you're in, such as supervisor, task force chair, and so forth. Sometimes, or typically, when you are in a human service organization, the position you're in gives you a certain amount of official power to do certain things. There is also expert power, which is the use of your expertise on the issue at hand, your ability to convince people by your expertise and your knowledge and such. There is relationship power that comes from the use of your relationships with others, in which you can persuade people partly because they have a good relationship with you, they like you, they respect you, and they identify with you, and this influences their behavior and can influence their decision to go along with your request. Then there is reward power, which is the use of rewards to induce behavior. If you will work late, I will let you be off some afternoon or something like that. That's a reward for doing something. Then there is coercive power, which is the use of punishments. You might call this punishment power. You could threaten someone if they do not do something, such as you could say, if you do not turn this report in on time, this will come up in your annual evaluation by me as your supervisor. That's threatening them with a punishment if they don't do what you're saying they should do. What has been your experience with these types of power? Think of examples where someone tried to persuade you to do something, one or more of these types of power. Think about that and just think about whether what you think about it, how did you respond? And discuss that with somebody of importance here. Think about these different types of power and the influence of them upon you. You might also want to think about your own comfort in using them yourself in your attempt to persuade others. So how comfortable are you? I've just said that. When have you attempted to use each of these? Which one of these is most comfortable to you or the least comfortable to you? What are you more likely to rely upon than others? That's probably important as you think about, as we go through discussion of these different types of power, how they're used, and what outcomes are likely to be accomplished with them. 3 outcomes of attempts to use power. Let's conceptualize 3 different things that might be the outcome. You could get resistance. Followers fail to engage in the desired behavior. That would be resistance. Compliance. Followers engage in the desired behavior because they feel they must do so, but not because they are psychologically committed to it. So compliance means you do it, but you're not committed. Commitment means that you do it because you are psychologically committed. So think of these 3 different possible outcomes: resistance, compliance, or commitment. We're going to talk about that in regard to each of the types of power. Which type or types of power can lead to resistance? What about relationship power? Is it likely to lead to resistance? Well, I would say no. What about position power? I would say this is not likely to lead to resistance either. People are not going to resist the power you have been given as by your organization. What about expert power? If someone convinces you, you have taken it on as yourself, so you're not likely going to resist. Reward power, if someone offers you a reward, I would say that you're not likely going to resist reward power either. They're giving you a reward. What about coercive power? Okay, now we're in one where you are likely to see resistance. Someone's is offering a punishment to you, threatening to punish you if you don't do it. That's likely to lead to resistance. However, coercive power can lead to compliance because a person does it because they don't want the punishment. Which type or types of power can lead to compliance? What about expert power? If you use expert power, are you is there a reasonable chance it'll lead to compliance? I would say yes. What about reward power? I would say yes. What about relationship power? I would say yes. Position power? I would say yes. Coercive power? Well, coercive power is the one most likely to lead to resistance, but it also could lead to compliance. It could be that someone will avoid the punishment by doing what it is that you are requesting. What kinds of power can lead to commitment? This is where you may find a few things that are a little bit surprising. What about relationship power? If you're convinced by the virtue of your relationship with them, are they likely to become committed to it? I would say yes, because they identify with you, and so in a way they sort of take this on as their own. To the extent the person has taken on a behavior as their own behavior, they freely engaged in it and so forth, for reasons that are because it's good and so forth. I would say that relationship power is likely to lead to commitment. Reward power, will it likely to lead to commitment? We're not talking now about compliance, we're talking about commitment. You may be a little surprised to learn the research suggests that reward power does not lead to commitment. In fact, some studies have shown that you can take some people sometimes who are voluntarily engaging in a good behavior, start giving them a reward for doing it, and then drop the behavior, the reward, and find that they stopped doing the behavior. Why? Because they now attribute the reason for doing it to the reward, rather than the fact that it was the right thing to do according to their own values and so forth. What about expert power? That is also likely to lead to commitment, because if you effectively use expert power, you have convinced people. So they've taken it on as their own idea, or they agree with it, that it's the right thing, so to speak. What about coercive power? You're certainly not going to get commitment by threatening to punish somebody. If you threaten to punish somebody, that you may well get compliance, but they're not going to look upon it as something that's a desired behavior that they've decided to do on their own. Position power is not likely to lead to commitment either. They're doing it because you have the position power to direct them to do it, rather than because it's their own voluntary action. Here's an exercise. Think of a situation where you need to get someone to engage in behavior not now engaged in. Think of the best way to avoid resistance. Think of whether compliance is enough, or if you really need to achieve commitment. What type of power will work best? So you might want to think about that as an exercise to discuss with other people. And the question too is, do you have this power? The type of power that will work best, do you have it? If expert power will work best, you have to ask yourself, do I have the conceptual tools to convince people because of my expertise? I'm going to go through a number of slides here that refer to guidelines for using power. I'm going to present them rather quickly. This is information taken from the following book by Yokel, Leadership in Organizations. Here are guidelines for position power. Make polite, clear requests when you're using position power. Explain the reasons for the request. Don't exceed your scope of authority because you are using your position power, so you have to stay within that power. Follow proper channels. Follow up to verify compliance. And don't expect to achieve commitment. So those are some guidelines for the use of position power when you are exercising that kind of power. Reward power, offer rewards that people desire. If they don't care about this reward, it's not going to have much influence. Offer rewards that are fair and ethical. Don't promise more than you can deliver. Explain criteria for rewards. Provide rewards as promised. Don't use rewards in a manipulative way. And don't expect commitment. How about coercive power? Well, there are some rules about that too. Explain the rules and consequences of failure. Respond to infractions promptly. Don't show favoritism. Get the facts before acting. Give warnings and stay calm. Make the punishment fit the crime. So those are some kinds of things you can do, and be consistent. Those are some things you can do that will help you to be more effective, to more effectively use coercive power. You may be engaged in a situation when that's really needed, and don't expect commitment. Here are some guidelines for relationship power. Here, I'll just throw these out here for you to consider. You can hit the pause button and look over them and think about them. Here are guidelines for expert power. Again, I'm just going to click these up here and give a list for you to think about as you think about the possibility of using expert power, things to do, things to avoid. So we might talk a little bit about how to enhance your power. Do you have expertise in coping with important problems in your agency? The more you have that, the more power you will have. Are you positioned in the middle of the flow of information and work to be done? That's a good position to improve your power. Are you difficult to replace? Okay, here's a summary. There are 5 types of power that can be used when you want to influence others. The types of power lead to commitment, and some do not, or some types lead to commitment, some do not. All types of power, however, can lead to compliance. There are guidelines that can help be more effective in the use of each power. Your power in the organization is related to a number of variables about your place.